Hello and welcome to Stranger Stopping Strangers, podcast number 36. A big welcome back to anybody who's returning, and thanks for stopping in to anybody who's new this week. Well, this week's podcast, I get a chance to talk to Jason Fisher. And Jason and I met via the podcast. He was listening and sent me a note, and we started some correspondence, and here we are. So much fun getting to make a new friend from across the country, and, really what Stranger Stopping Strangers is all about. So we start off with Let It Rock, his selection, which was very apropos because we taped the podcast a day after the late but always great Chuck Berry passed. And it really kicked off a bit of a theme of the Grateful Dead's influence by musicians and songwriters and how they now are influencing current and future musicians and songwriters. And it was a really fun conversation. And we play a couple songs for his kids, future budding Deadheads. So just a really great time and very full circle to the past, current, and future generations of Deadheads. And really, if anybody is listening and would like to share their story and make a digital soundtrack, please shoot me an email because I'd love to hear from you. And it's really community podcast and what it's all about. So I hope everybody enjoys listening as much as we enjoyed making it. And we'll catch you in a couple of weeks. Well, Jason, welcome to Stranger Stopping Strangers.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. We've chatted a little bit and gotten little, tastes of our stories, but I'm excited to do a deep dive and hear, how it all unravels.
I can't wait. It should be fun.
Absolutely. So tell me a little bit about the beginning. Tell me a little bit about, your early days with music and discovery time.
Yeah, I would absolutely call myself a late bloomer when it comes to my my friendship and my relationship with this music and being an actual Deadhead. I grew up in a small town in Colorado, and I was the oldest of 4 kids. I had a few friends that had older brothers that could kind of guide them into music. You want to listen to this band, you want to blow off these cheesy bands, and I never had that, and so I kind of picked my way through myself. I was always around the Dead. My hometown's kind of like a, hippie paradise, and so the Dead was always there, playing in, the kitchens of restaurants where I worked in and all this kind of stuff, but it was always just kind of in the background of my life. I believe you had a guest on your podcast a while ago who attended the show in Telluride in 1987.
Yeah, Jeff Rosen. That was awesome.
Yes. And when that came along, I was 14 years old. I was just kind of working on a construction crew for the summer, and everybody on the crew and everybody in town was just kind of going nuts. Oh, the Dead's coming to Telluride. It's the closest that they had ever been, to my part of Colorado. And so, they were going, and people were asking me if I was going to go, if I wanted to go, but it just seemed really kind of weird and foreign to me, and my folks didn't let me go anyway. And so I missed that. And as I, got into high school and beyond, I started listening to the Dead a lot more. I found some friends that, had some tapes, and, just kind of like, filled in my gaps. I had picked up a few studio albums, and a few tapes over the years, and I was just really able to fill in some of my, gaps in my knowledge and really pick up more of this band, but it didn't really stick right away. I saw the Dead 3 times in the early 90s in Vegas and in Phoenix, big stadium shows. My experience was not the greatest at these. I was really far back. The sound quality to me wasn't that great. I was just, it was there. I was there and it was fun, but it didn't really click with me.
Right.
And then when Jerry passed, I mean, it hit me, in terms of like, I knew that we lost somebody that was meaningful and impactful to my life, but it was around the same time that Kurt Cobain died and Tupac Shakur died. And the analogy I always come up with is those 3 deaths all kind of hit me about the same in terms of like, oh, that's really sad, and I'm really sad to lose that music. But it wasn't like a big devastating thing to me because at that time I wasn't a huge fan. But then in the late 90s, I got hooked up with some friends that were really, really into Widespread Panic. And I started going to a ton of Widespread shows, and I sort of picked up on, the tour scene and the lot, and, going on these long runs, multiple shows, multiple nights, traveling with a band, that kind of thing. And I realized this whole world of music. And the Dead was, again, always in the background for me. I started listening more and more, to 70s Dead and a lot of Jerry Band, and it really started clicking with me, started going to a lot of, other ones, further shows, Phil and Friends, Rat Dog. I've got to a point now, I'm older, I've got kids, and I listen to more Dead and Dead-related music than I ever have. I'm much more of a fan than I was when the actual Grateful Dead was on this earth. I'm sad that I didn't, do more back then, but I'm really, really happy to have access to what we do right now as fans in this day and age.
Well, I agree. And there's just so much fun stuff to look forward to. And, I love hearing what you say about the future and going forward because, regardless of how old you are, we can't go backwards. It is about going forward. And there's just so much fun music coming up, on the horizon every day.
Yes, there is.
Very cool. So I want to go into some music. And the first song that you selected is not new music. In fact, it's old, and it's classic, and it's more apropos today on the 20th of March than ever before. So tell me a little bit about your first pick.
Well, this is a song called Let It Rock, and it is appropriate today. It's a Chuck Berry song, and we lost Chuck Berry over the weekend. Obviously, he contributed quite a few songs to the Grateful Dead songbook, Around and Around and Promised Land. And this is a song that Jerry Garcia played a lot, with Jerry Band. I was first turned on to this song from Widespread Panic. They played it a fair amount in their live repertoire. And this was a show from 1974. And it was the only time that this song was played by the Grateful Dead.
Wow.
And it's a cool version. It's a pretty short, snappy version, nice podcast length. And hope you like it.
Fantastic. Well, I'm really excited. I did have a listen, and it is really cool, and I'm excited to share it. So everybody, let's hear Let It Rock from the late, great Chuck Berry, and then we'll be back.
listening to Let It Rock. And, I just love that you made this selection for so many reasons. I mean, yeah, it is apropos to what is Chuck Berry passing, but it's been such a huge topic that I've danced around with a couple of people, and I'd love to just get your perspective on, which is, just the idea that this classic music, this genre of music that was, created in the back half of the 20th century is being played by so many musicians. And I feel like it's almost alleviating the words cover band or covering, like I think I talked about it with Ira and I love to get everyone's different opinions about it, because with other musical genres, with classic and with jazz, it's just a given that different people are going to play the same music that was written. And what are your thoughts on that going forward?
Well, yeah, I believe it was Ira that was talking about, Beethoven. When we talk about Beethoven music, this was music that was written hundreds of years ago, and it's been performed continuously to this day. Shakespeare plays have been performed continuously to this day, and we still think of them as compositions by Beethoven and by Shakespeare, and we pay attention to who is performing them, because obviously some people performing them are of a higher skill level. Some people put new and different spins and interpretations on them, but we still think of them as works by the original composers that are still modern and fresh, even though the people that created them have long since passed. And what I love about the catalog of a band, of the Grateful Dead, is, they created and composed, hundreds of fantastic songs. I think it's the greatest catalog of any band in the history of music in terms of the scope and depth of the music that they created. I mean, the Beatles made great music, but they were only together as a band for like 7 years. And you can, rattle off, Bob Dylan is a fantastic songwriter, but Bob Dylan does not, in my opinion, have the range and depth of creating various forms of rock and roll. Bob Dylan did not necessarily create an entire musical genre of his own. But what's great about the Dead is that they were able to sprinkle in all of this great original music that they composed with many, many works comprising the entire American songbook. They've gone back to, old traditional songs and Woody Guthrie, early Americana, that kind of stuff, and old blues, and then, taken more like contemporary, pop music from their, people that were recording at the same time, the band and the Who and bands like that. And you were able to go and go attend a Dead show or listen to a Dead show, and you didn't know where these songs were going to be in terms of order in the set, and it didn't really matter because they're putting their own spin and interpretation on what they're playing, and they made everything Dead songs. Yeah. And what's happening now is if those Dead songs are being played by other bands that are either quote-unquote Dead cover bands, or they're being played by modern contemporary musicians that have nothing otherwise to do with the Dead, the music lives on. The music never stops. And it's just becoming part of the fabric of listening to American music. It's not segregated from everything else. It's, I remember when I was a kid, it just seemed like the Dead was its own category.
Yeah.
And it still is, but it's more tied together with everything. I think they're getting more and more recognition as not just being a cultural phenomenon, but as one of the greatest creators of original American music that there ever been.
I totally agree. And even the original creators of American music that incorporate other songwriters and other people's original music, like the Beatles and like
Yes.
Chuck Berry and like,
Yes.
many Bob Dylan songs. And,
Yes.
I just think it's a really exciting time, and I love talking about it because, as we said before we went into Let It Rock, the company's coming up and we're all excited to go because of just, the music and the vibe and the people all together. And I think it's a really exciting time. And I think that in other genres, it's been accepted. And really, when you look at the difference, it's a matter of time, and time changes everything. I think we're in a transitional time right now where things are being broken down and new bands are creating catalogs that are, again, not cover or, I just think it's exciting, and I love talking about it because, this shit's new. I mean, again, it's like late 20th century, and classical origins go back to 19th century, and the blues and the jazz, they go back to early 20th century. So I think everything takes time to evolve.
Yes, and many of the themes that the Dead wrote about in their original songs. I mean, some of them are just it's timeless themes. It's love and loss and crime and redemption and all of these things. But there are some things that the Dead was never like a super political band, but they did hit on some things in terms of modern society and government and the citizens' role in it. That with each new chapter of American history that we're writing, some of these songs and ideas take on new relevance.
Absolutely.
And it's really neat to look at the world through that prism as we do.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's like you look at something like New Speed Boogie, which is old.
Yes.
And then you look at something like Throwing Stones, which was, in the late 80s. And,
yes.
and then even that was, almost 30 years ago. I want to play more music, but I want to sidebar. And you just hit on a story that is just so relevant, my recent history. And it's when I went to go see Dark Star Orchestra in November, they were doing a recreation show, and it was right after the election, and a lot of the songs, the people didn't know if it was a recreation show or not, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And so a lot of the songs that they played, people thought they were creating this catalog to be relevant to what was going on in today. So, at the set break, people are like, this isn't a recreation show. This is for now. This is November.
Right.
This is what's going on. These are all very specific songs that they've selected.
Like they created the set list as a topical thing.
Right, exactly.
Right.
And that was kind of the buzz, at the set break of like, that's what was happening. And then at the end, it was from like 1989,
Sure.
like it was
Sure.
a recreation. And so again, it's all like relative to, what's going on in our world and what we think and what we hear and how it transcends. And people were so convinced that this was all now, but
Right.
It wasn't. It was 89, but it was as real now as it was then.
Of course it is, yes. These themes and these ideas are timeless. We can apply them, to many different situations, and it makes the music fuller and richer and more relevant.
Absolutely. No, totally. Well, so let's go on to the next song. So the next song that you picked, I want to hear some of the feelings and stories and reasons behind, is Dark Hollow.
Yes. Dark Hollow was almost always performed as an acoustic song. They did the big acoustic runs in 1970 and 1980. The ones from 1980 were recorded for the Reckoning album, and that was probably the first live Grateful Dead album that I really just obsessed over. Listened to Reckoning so many times, and when I finally discovered archive.org, what was a really neat thing for me was going back through all of those shows, like the Radio City run in 1980, because the Reckoning album was a compilation. It wasn't, a straight through recording. It was, they picked, what they thought were the best recordings there. And Dark Hollow was always one of my favorites from that run. And I always heard this urban legend that they had played Dark Hollow with the Electric Band. And the more reading I did on it, I found that there were two shows in 1971 where they played it with the Electric Band. One, Jerry was still on acoustic, but this version is from April of 71, which was the only time that they ever played this song with Jerry plugged in.
Wow.
And it's a swinging version of a song that's usually a little bit more mellow, but it's still, beautiful Bobby lyrics and wonderful song that I've enjoyed a lot with my family, actually.
Well, it does have it is one of those songs, and I think like a handful of those songs and reckonings are very, they have that childlike folklore, I guess I want to say, a folkloric sense that is, that appeals to children's.
They're like sing-along campfire songs.
Exactly.
Right.
Well,
right.
This version, I bet, is going to be new for so many listeners. So let's go in and hear it, and then we'll go a little bit down the road. So everybody enjoy.
I'd rather be in some dark harbor where the sun don't ever shine than to be in some big city in a small room with a girl on my mind. So blow your whistle, freight train, take me far on down the track. I'm going away, I'm leaving today. I'm going, but I ain't coming back. I'd rather be in some dark hollow where the sun don't ever shine than to be home alone, knowing that you're gone would cause me to lose my mind. So blow your whistle, freight train, take me far on down the track. I'm going away, I'm leaving today. I'm going, but I ain't coming back. So blow your whistle, freight train, take me far on down the track. I'm going away, I'm leaving today. I'm going, but I ain't coming back. And I'm going away, leaving today. I'm going, but I ain't coming back.
Well, back from Dark Hollow and Reckoning, and it's funny putting this on. This happened with a Lump of Two podcast, and it's happening now. And anyone who's listened to these podcasts, I just love a little serendipity and magic around everything. I manage to find it every week. So I think my first recording from Reckoning is on the podcast that aired today with Eli, and so that happened with I had choices and then two choices again. So I wonder what that means.
There's someone looking out for you.
There's someone that's like drawing in that direction, right?
Yes.
When you get drawn back to something, to have the sequence of selections that happen in a row. I think it's cool. I mean, as you've mentioned, there's so much out there that, there's so much. Have the repetitive, well, I guess this isn't from Reckoning, but to have Reckoning come up 2 weeks in a row and
Right.
not come up before is, makes me want to dig into it some more.
It's a great album.
Absolutely. The next pick on your list is from the Nationals with Morning Dew. So, tell me a little bit about, where you were when you came to this and a little bit of that backstory.
Well, yeah, this is a compilation album that was put together by the Dessner brothers. I believe their names are Aaron and Bryce Dessner, who are the rhythm section of the National. The National is not a band that I've ever listened to obsessively, but they're a good band, and I listen to a lot of indie rock, and so they've always kind of been in my sphere. But they put this album together. It was a long-term project that they did. They developed a really strong friendship with Bob Weir when Bob recorded his album of cowboy music last year, Blue Mountain. They served as his backing band on that album. Really? And when he toured last year, they served as his backing band on that tour. And so, Bobby's on the album a couple times, playing with the National and with Wilco. there's a few other, it's either Bill Kreutzmann or his kids are on there. Bruce Hornsby does a really, really great version of Black Muddy River. Probably my favorite recording of that song. He with a guy from Bon Iver. And there's just a lot of bands that I really like that I had no idea that they were even into the Dead. Kurt Weill and the War on Drugs and Real Estate and Courtney Barnett and Wilco, put really great versions of songs. What I consider a great cover is if you're playing somebody else's song, what you do is you change the listener's perception of that song. And there's different kinds of covers. The one I always go to is sometimes a cover will actually steal a song from the original artist, and I always think about Hendrix's version of All Along the Watchtower. Essentially, once Hendrix played it, Bob Dylan was probably like, well, that one's yours now.
It's over. Yeah, no.
yeah.
Well, no, absolutely. I think about Joe Crocker's career was
yes.
a Beatles cover, right?
Yes.
That's another great, I think about, is just completely took that song and turned it into something else. And if you were to say, name a Joe Crocker song,
I Could Buy With a Little Help from My Friends, yes.
Exactly. Though I don't think he took it over in a better way personally. But anyways, no shade to Joe Crocker, but the Beatles.
Yeah, but this version of Morning Dew, this is a song that in general that I've really started to get deeper into over the last year. It wasn't, if you talked to me a year or 2 years ago, I wouldn't have listed Morning Dew as one of my favorite Dead songs. Never disliked it, but it was just kind of there for me. But I've done more reading on, just kind of like the history behind the songwriting process with this song. I've listened to more and more versions. The Cornell 5877 that's coming out in May. This is the one single that was released off of it that they've been playing a little bit on, Sirius XM, and you can get it on the streaming services. And so this is just a song that I've been more into. The Nationals version of it is, I think, really neat. They do it in I think the proper and respectful tempo for this song. Their recording style and the vocalist style is just kind of echoing and haunting, and it really fits the lyrics and the pace of this song. And so this was one of the songs off of that Day of the Dead compilation that stood out to me. And like we were talking about earlier, the music is continuing and it's being adopted by, younger and more contemporary musicians and taken in different directions. And I think it's fantastic.
I'm really excited to have it on. Absolutely. I love that you are bringing something new to the table, and some people may have heard it and some people may not. And then, it makes me want to go hear more about what they've done. It just exposes different musicians and different angles. And very, very cool. Well, let's go in and hear it. And then we'll come back and maybe talk a little bit about what's next on the list, which is kind of like what's next on the road. So I'm excited to dive in to the next topic. So everybody enjoy listening to Morning Dew from the Nationals, and we will be back.
Sounds great.
In the morning dew, my morning dew, my honey. Walk me out in the morning dew today. I'll walk you out in the morning dew, my honey. Yes, it doesn't matter anyway. Yes, it doesn't matter anyway. Yes, it doesn't matter anyway. Guess it doesn't matter anyway.
Well, back from listening to Morning Dew, and, you know, the next incarnation of the band that you selected is Dead and Company. But I don't want to talk right away about, you know, your selection, but just, you know, a little bit about, you know, past experience and future experiences coming up with seeing the band on the road.
Okay. Yeah. I came into Dead and Company. I think my experience was similar to a lot of other fans in that, you know, Fare Thee Well was a really cool idea and a really cool project. I did not attend the shows, but I watched the webcast. Really thought Trey did a fantastic job. Had a lot of friends that went to those shows, and they came back and said, you know, it was fun and the vibe was cool and the music sounded great. And then, you know, immediately, like, the echo of Fare Thee Well had not even finished ringing, and we're talking about Dead and Company. And we're not only talking about, you know, another version of the band, but we've got John Mayer jumping in there. And I had the same level of skepticism about John Mayer that a lot of people did. And I also have come to really appreciate and enjoy, you know, what he's doing. And I like it more every day. I listen to it more every day. But, yeah, I was able to get up to Boulder last year and see Dead and Company. Went with some good friends of mine. Took the whole family up there. And but the kids did not go to the show. We rented a house and had a babysitter with the kids. And I went with our friends and with my wife. It was my wife's first Dead show.
Ooh, what did she think of the scene? What did she think of just like the overall scene of the people and, you know?
She had a high level of skepticism coming in. And she thought it was, I can't speak for her. I can't say that, you know, what exactly she thought it was going to be, but she had some nervousness. Is this going to be just crazy, drug-fueled anarchy? But, you know, we go to the first night and she comes out and she was just like, man, you know, that was really good. And I knew most of those songs. And I was singing along and dancing, and I had a really, really good time. And then we went to the second night, and we're kind of like packing up for the weekend. And she approached me, and she's like, okay, you know, I'm not a Deadhead. But that was really, really fun. And if we could ever do that again, I would do it. And so our Christmas card this year, I made a picture of the two of us at that show, and I just put Deadheads at the bottom, and she laughed.
Aww. Well, you know, it's funny. I have a similar experience, and I asked because last summer, I took my husband to SPAC to see Dead & Co. And he is a huge music fan. I mean, he knows, you know, as much about music, more about music than I do, about so many, you know, different bands. And he loves great music. I mean, similar genres, great taste. But he's not a Deadhead. You know, he's just, he's not. He can appreciate, he has some favorite songs. You know, he had Skeletons in the Closet when he was in high school, and he never saw them live. And since we've been together, he's gotten to know the catalog more and has, you know, some favorites, but not a Deadhead. Music fan, not a Deadhead.
Sure.
So I was, so he came with me, and he's actually going to come with me this year to SPAC too. And he was so funny. He got lost. He took off like at the beginning of, I want to say like it was the first song to go get something to to drink. And it was an outdoor venue, and he didn't figure out that to get through the crowds back down, that you just have to walk through the crowds, you don't walk around. You just like the sea will part and you just walk.
You have to take the initiative and people will let you through. Yes.
Yeah. No, he had no idea. So he was gone the whole first set. So I was just kind of like by myself, which is cool. Like I made some friends, had a good time, like all good and danced and whatever. And I was kind of like, oh, he's gone. I hope he's having a good time. Like, I don't know where you are. It's been, I don't know, well over an hour. And, popped back and there was some guy that was like dressed completely in like a rainbow onesie bodysuit thing. I don't know. He came back with some pretty funny, like observations and shit that, he hasn't seen at other shows. And the verdict was enjoyed himself, but at SPAC, not interested in going to any indoor venues, any like crowded venues, any big places. Like and we'll go back to SPAC because I said, are you going to come to Fenway? And he's like, fuck no, like, no, like not in for like any spot, any venue, but for like a fun summer place. Yeah, sure. For the once a year.
Well, venue's a big deal. And, I've been to, a lot of great venues around the country. And it really, really adds to, the experience of the show that you're seeing. I've seen some great bands in some crappy venues and, if you're great, you're great, but I'd rather see somebody, in a place that is comfortable and looks cool and, you just kind of get the vibe of the building or the arena that you're in. And a cool venue can make everybody have a better time.
No, absolutely. No, I totally agree. I think it's good to just sort of know where you're at, know where your limits are, and know what you're into, and just do that. So it was a good experience that will hopefully be repeated as a good experience this June. So, well, you picked St. Stephen. So tell me a little bit about how you came to this song from Dead & Company as the next selection.
Well, the reason I kind of landed on St. Stephen is I've just kind of been thinking and following John Mayer's progression with this band, and I've ended up, I don't know how I got here, but I've ended up like listening to a lot of John Mayer live music from before he joined Dead & Company, and he sort of got this little dead bug a few years ago. And he'd been playing, Friend of the Devil and Althea, and Going Down the Road Feeling Bad, just throwing those songs into his repertoire before Dead & Company ever came along. And he had this relationship with Bob Weir. He met Bob Weir and played with him a little bit. And John Mayer is a fantastic guitar player. You've had numerous people on your show that have talked about his skill as a player, and beyond that, just his passion for music. What I think is really, really neat is his relationship with Bobby. They have this thing that's kind of a cosmic thing. John Mayer was born on Bob Weir's 30th birthday.
Yeah.
And, so here in October, Bobby's going to be turning 70 on the same day that John Mayer's turning 40. And they have just a really neat relationship that is partly like musical mentor, partly like father figure, but partly like just, buddies. And they have a lot of respect for each other as musicians and as people. And their friendship is really visible. And it's just kind of a neat thing to see. But what Mayer plays all this stuff, mostly he plays it very faithfully. He's not trying to copy what Garcia did, but he's staying within the song. He's staying within the structure and melody of the song. And if we're listening as, longtime fans of the music, there's not much that Mayer does that really kind of steps outside the tradition. But I have noticed as I was playing a lot of shows from the summer tour last year that with St. Stephen, he tends to go in a little bit different direction. He plays it as more of a little bit more feedback, a little bit more crunch to the guitar that you might get from like a 80s hard rock guitar sound, and he kind of shreds it a little bit. And I think it's great. What they did with St. Stephen was, I thought, a little bit outside the tradition, taking it from its psychedelic roots to a different place that I think is new and interesting, and it kind of fits the theme that we're talking about of keeping the music modern and fresh and moving forward. And I do not remember which show I took this from. It was Alpine Valley or at Fenway, but this is a good one.
No, I totally agree with everything you say. And listeners, there was no theme chosen for today's podcast. So just in case anybody is wondering, I mean, Iris, I didn't talk to at all before. We have chatted on the phone, but we haven't talked about any of this stuff. So this is, yes, one more little bit of serendipity that seems to flow through all conversations dead related. But no, there was no theme assigned to today's conversation. But what's old is new and what's new is old. Kicked off with Chuck Berry. It's just it's going down that road. So and I love this road. So much fun. Well, let's go in and hear some St. Stephen from Dead and Company, and then we'll be back with one more story and one more song.
Okay.
Each finger dipped in moonlight, writing word for word across the morning sky. Sunlight splatters dawn with itself. Darkness shrugs and bids the day goodbye. Bleeding arrow, sharp and narrow. Lot of fleeting matters you have spun. Several seasons, wish their treason. Rock the baby scarlet cover on your own. Talk about your ills. One man gathers what another man spills.
Back from listening to St. Stephen with Dead & Company, and, I started asking you about past Dead & Company and future Dead & Company, and then I, in classic form, hijacked the conversation with my own personal story with my husband, but we never got to future Dead & Company. And when we did talk before, you had told me that you have some plans this summer, and I want to have you share them because they just make my heart smile.
Yes. Well, like I said, we went to the Boulder shows last year with the whole family. And my son, he's 7, he turns 8 next week actually. And he has developed quite a fondness for this music and for this band. And he was really sad when we went to Boulder to see these shows, but he himself did not go to the shows. And so what I told him was, well, you're a little young, and I really wanted to see the scene and just kind of get a sense for, is it going to be safe for a kid that young, and is he going to have a good time? And so I told him last summer, if he played his cards right, then maybe we would get to go to a show next year. But at that point, I didn't know, we never know. Is this band, every time they announce a tour, will this be the end of it? Some of these guys are getting old, and, some of these guys have other projects, and we never know. There's no certainty that this will ever happen again. And so they announced summer tour, I think it was back in December. And I snatched up tickets, 6 shows. They opened the tour in Las Vegas and Phoenix, and so those are both driving distance for me. And then they're doing Boulder again, driving distance for me. and they finished the tour in Chicago. They're playing 2 nights at Wrigley Field. And I have a cousin who lives in Chicago. He's a big Dead fan. I mean, he used to tour with them back in the late 80s and, sell shirts and whatever. And he gave me a shirt and, some tapes back then, and it was a really kind of formative thing for me. But I never had any expectation that I would go to all of those shows. I was just hoping to, maybe do 4 of the 6. And the way it just sort of ended up was my wife is going back east. She's actually going to a wedding in Boston in June, and she's going with her mom and my daughter, who's now 5. And she approached me and said, I'm doing this trip with our daughter. It would be really neat if you did something with your son so he didn't feel left out. Why don't you 2 go to Chicago? And this was just sort of dropped in my lap.
Wow.
Got some plane tickets and told Jackson that he's going to get to go, and we've been talking about it a lot. I always have Dead music on. It's 70% of what I play around the house, and he likes it, but it's not something that he had really actively taken a role in much. He would notice songs or I like that one, whatever. But over the last month or 2, since we've talked about doing this trip, he's really, can you play that version of,
that's so cool.
of playing in the band?
Cool.
Yeah.
And
awesome. I did this thing with him one time, we're listening to some version of China Rider, and I was just kind of rewinding, I'm like, right here's the moment where, we transition from one song to the next. And he heard that and thought that was pretty neat. And so now every time we play a China Rider, he's like, is that it? Is that it? Oh, there it is. But he's doing, he'll do it just kind of reflexively now. We'll be listening to some show, whatever, and he'll be like, oh, that's, is that Eyes of the World starting up? And it's just, yeah.
Wow.
He's turning into a absolute hardcore little Deadhead. And so
cool.
I think we're going to have a great time.
So you made a trip of a lifetime. And, that's such a great age because, when I think back to childhood, I feel like 7, 8, those are your, earliest solid memories, I have, flashes of, when you're 4, 5, 6, but I
Right.
don't know. I think 7, 8 years old is when it's a lifetime experience. Obviously lifetime meaningful for you with your son, but that'll be something that he'll take with him forever, that weekend away with his dad and the music. And, it's so beautiful. I love it. Love it. Well, this plays into the last song selections. Jackson, your son.
Yes.
What would he pick for his final selection?
His favorite Dead song is Jackarow. His nickname is Jack, and he loves Jackarow, and we've played many different versions of that song. My daughter, her name is Evangeline, and she really loves He's Gone because nothing left to do but smile, smile, smile. She actually has a T-shirt that says smile, smile, smile.
Aww.
And so she really wanted me to pick either that song or Evangeline by Jerry Band.
No, we'll play them both. We'll play them both. No. Hey, I've got 2 kids. What's fair is fair, man. No,
yeah.
We will play them both. This podcast is it's a digital scrapbook for you. It's fun. It's ad hoc. You can send me the other file, and we'll just do one after the other because you gotta you got 2 kids. You're gonna have two favorites. Absolutely.
They'll think it's great. They think this whole thing is awesome. Every day, they're like, "Daddy, are you going to be on the radio today?"
What you're going to have to do is when this is on Fish Creek Radio, shout out to Rick, you're going to have to play it because they do it live. So you'll have the podcast, and I'll send you the MP3 to just have. But
cool.
When it's on live, there's kind of something fun about that too. Because it's boom. So that'll be We'll give you the heads up on that, but cool. No, we're gonna add them both. So Evangeline and Jack, we got one for both of you. I have a Joe and a Julia, and one can't get 4 M&Ms without the other getting 4 M&Ms.
Of
so
course.
As a mom, I would never pick one song and not the other because that's just not fair. So right on. Well, let's go in and play these for for your children, and then we'll come back and we'll do a little goodbye.
That's wonderful.
Okay.
There was a wealthy merchant in London, he did well. He had a beautiful daughter, the truth to you I'll tell. Oh, the truth to you I'll tell. She had sweethearts of plenty and men of high degree. None but Jack the sailor, her true love ever could be. Now Jack is gone sailing with trouble on his mind. He's left his native country and his darling girl behind. Oh, his darling girl behind. She went out to a tailor shop and dressed in misery. She climbed on board a vessel to convey herself away. Convey yourself away. Before you get on board, sir, your name I'd like to know. She smiled all in her countenance, they called me Jackaroo. Oh, they called me Jackaroo. Your fingers, they are small. Your cheeks too red and rosy to face the cannonball. Oh, to face the cannonball. I know my waist is splendid, my fingers, they are small. It would not make me tremble to see 10,000 fall. Oh, to see 10,000 fall. Dead and wounded, her darling boy she found. Oh, darling boy she found. She picked him up all in her arms and carried him to the town. She sent for a physician who quickly healed his wound. Oh, who quickly healed his wound. This couple, they got married so well it didn't free. This couple, they got married, so what are you and me? Oh, what are you and me? Oh, what are you and me? Nothing's gonna bring him back. Nothing's gonna bring him back. Well, let's go. Nothing's gonna bring him back. Nothing's gonna bring him back. Nothing's gonna bring him back. Well, it's not
Well, back from listening to the last couple selections, and this has just been so much fun. I'm so glad that that you made the time to come on and share your stories and your music with us.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I've come to really enjoy your podcast and the stories that have been on it. Always makes me smile. It's always a nice addition to my week, and so I thank you for the invitation. And it's been a ton of fun.
Absolutely. And, actually, I'm just thinking back to how we met is you sent me a message that you, listened to the podcast and that you enjoyed it. And then I said, why don't you come on and be a guest? And then we kind of started the dialogue. So I will give a shout out to anybody who's listening to this podcast. Send me a message and I will invite you along to be a guest. Because it's so much fun. And now I have a new friend to banter about music with, and strangers stopping strangers. It's awesome. So I thank you for messaging me and getting the ball started.
Well, thank you very, very much. I've really enjoyed talking about these things. They're like my favorite things in life, and they make me smile.
Fantastic. Well, until next time, thank you and bye.
Stopping strangers just to shake their hands. Everybody's praying in the heart of Golden Band, heart of Gold Band.